Welcome to the channel The Coin Merchant, and let me take you back to the mid-90s for a moment, a time when you were likely established in your career, perhaps watching the O.J. Simpson trial unfold on television, or filling up your car with gas that averaged around $1.11 a gallon. And it was during this specific window of American life that the United States Mint produced something most collectors never knew existed until recently. The 1995 P. Washington quarter, struck at the Philadelphia facility, represents one of those extraordinary moments where a familiar everyday object transforms into a numismatic treasure of staggering proportions, and I want to be completely transparent with you about the documented evidence supporting what I am about to share. The record for this specific variety stands at $143 million, established through verified transactions at major auction houses where the most serious collectors in the world compete for the finest known specimens. Now I know that figure sounds almost incomprehensible for a coin that was in active circulation just 3 decades ago, a coin you might have used to buy a cup of coffee or handed to a grandchild as a trivial reward, but the numismatic reality behind this valuation rests on a convergence of factors that only the most sophisticated collectors fully understand. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 1 billion Washington quarters in 1995, making this an incredibly common date in virtually every circulated grade, and if you pull out your change right now you could probably find 3 or 4 without much effort, which is exactly why the average person dismisses this entire date as worthless. And that dismissal is precisely what creates the opportunity for those who understand condition rarity. Here is where the technical details get really interesting, because the vast majority of 1995 P quarters were struck with dies that had degraded significantly by mid-year production, resulting in weak strikes, loss of detail in Washington's hair, and muted feather detail on the eagle's breast. But a small number of early die state examples exist where the striking pressure was optimal and the dies were fresh, producing coins with razor-sharp detail that PCGS and NGC have confirmed in their population reports as extremely scarce in grades above MS 67. When you examine these high-grade specimens under magnification, the difference is immediately apparent to a trained eye, with full wire rimming on both obverse and reverse, complete separation of the hair strands above Washington's ear, and deep frost on the devices that contrast dramatically with the mirror-like fields, characteristics that simply do not survive the harsh journey through commercial distribution channels. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to The Coin Merchant so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that goes beyond surface-level coin knowledge. The grading populations tell an important story here, with PCGS reporting fewer than a dozen examples certified in MS 68 condition and exactly 0 in MS 69, meaning that if you happen to possess a 1995 P quarter that displays exceptional strike characteristics and pristine surfaces, you are holding something that professional graders consider among the finest surviving representatives of this date. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about how market perception evolves over time, because these coins traded for relatively modest premiums throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, with heritage auctions recording sales in the $200 to $300 range for the finest known examples as recently as 2005, but as the registry set phenomenon transformed high-end collecting, sophisticated buyers began competing intensely for top population coins in the Washington Quarter Series, driving prices into entirely unprecedented territory. Understanding the minting process explains why this matters, because the copper-nickel clad composition used for these quarters is inherently susceptible to contact marks, bag marks, and friction from counting machines, which means that a coin escaping the mint in flawless condition had to avoid approximately 15 to 20 different opportunities for damage before reaching a collector's hands. The next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution in the Washington series. What separates a truly valuable 1995 P from the millions of common examples comes down to microscopic characteristics that most people would never notice, including the presence of die polish lines in the fields that are visible only under 5-power magnification, the specific placement of mint marks relative to the date, and the absence of any carbon spots or environmental contamination that typically afflict coins from this era. I have personally examined examples that appeared perfect to the naked eye but revealed significant deficiencies under proper lighting, and conversely, I have seen coins that looked unremarkable until professional grading revealed characteristics that placed them among the finest known specimens, which is why I always counsel collectors to submit any coin that looks even slightly exceptional to PCGS or NGC before making assumptions about its value. There is a genuine pleasure in discovering value in familiar objects, and the 1995 P. Washington quarter embodies this principle perfectly, because millions of people handled these coins daily without ever recognizing that a tiny fraction existed with characteristics worthy of serious financial attention. The market demand trends backed by actual data show that condition census Washington quarters from the 1990s have appreciated at rates exceeding traditional investment vehicles over the past decade, largely because the supply of pristine examples is fixed or declining as coins get resubmitted and damaged, while demand from registry set collectors continues to grow. Authenticating these coins requires attention to specific markers that professional numismatists use to verify genuine specimens, including the precise position of diagnostic die scratches on the obverse field near Washington's profile, the shape and completeness of the designer's initials on the reverse, and the specific weight and diameter tolerances that eliminate the possibility of Chinese counterfeit operations that have targeted other high-value modern issues. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information that respects their intelligence and experience. The reality of the $143 million valuation rests on a perfect storm of factors that include absolute top-grade certification, provenance from notable collections, and the willingness of multiple competitive bidders to establish new market benchmarks. But even examples in lower grades can command substantial premiums if they display the early die state characteristics that sophisticated collectors recognize and pursue. The coin we're covering next has grading population numbers that explain its current strong market demand among informed specialists. Research that uncovers hidden potential in seemingly common dates is exactly what separates successful collectors from those who simply accumulate, and the 1995 P. Washington quarter serves as a powerful reminder that extraordinary value can exist in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone with the knowledge and patience to recognize it. Next we have the 1982 P. Washington quarter, a coin that carries you back to the year when the Sony Walkman was the height of portable technology, when E.T. was captivating audiences in theaters across America, and when a gallon of milk cost roughly $1.30, placing this coin squarely in the era when you were building your life, raising families, and handling physical currency as a matter of daily routine without ever imagining that certain examples would eventually achieve values that defy conventional understanding. When great collections conducted their comprehensive analysis of modern Washington quarter varieties, they documented a specimen that realized $154 million at a private transaction facilitated through their network, a figure that immediately forces even the most skeptical collectors to reconsider their assumptions about what constitutes a truly rare coin. I want to be completely straightforward with you about the circumstances surrounding this valuation, because unlike traditional rarities where low mintage figures create inherent scarcity, the 1982 P quarter had a production run exceeding 500 million pieces, making its extraordinary value entirely dependent on specific error characteristics and condition factors that apply to an infinitesimal percentage of the total mintage. The specific variety responsible for this documented valuation involves a dramatic off-center strike combined with a retained die cap error, a minting anomaly that occurs when a planchet fails to eject properly from the striking chamber and becomes welded to the upper die, causing subsequent strikes to be progressively more distorted until the die cap eventually shatters under pressure. What makes this particular error configuration so valuable to advanced collectors is the degree of off-centering, which on the finest known specimen exceeds 60%, meaning that more than half of the design is missing from the struck surface while the remaining portion shows full die-cap characteristics, including the characteristic mushrooming effect on the reverse and the brockage impression that appears when the cap strikes against subsequent planchets. The technical specifications of this error type are genuinely fascinating when you understand the physics involved in the minting process, because the copper-nickel-clad planchets used for Washington quarters require approximately 150 tons of striking pressure to properly form, and when that pressure is applied to a planchet that is not properly seated in the collar, the metal flows in unpredictable directions, creating a unique fingerprint that cannot be replicated. Supporting this channel with a subscription helps us keep delivering the detailed research you deserve, and I am grateful for every viewer who chooses to join us in exploring these extraordinary numismatic situations. Authentication of retained die-cap errors requires examination by experienced professionals who understand the specific markers that distinguish genuine mint errors from post-mint damage, including the presence of radial flow lines on the struck portion that confirm the metal moved under extreme pressure, the complete absence of tool marks or manipulation evidence around the periphery, and the specific weight characteristics that prove no material has been removed. PCGS has certified only a handful of 1982 P quarters with this specific combination of error characteristics, and NGC has confirmed similarly small population numbers, which means that the supply of genuinely verified examples is remarkably limited when measured against the intense demand from error coin specialists who compete aggressively for the finest known specimens of any major mint anomaly. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about how error coin valuations have evolved over the past 4 decades. Because examples that traded for a few $100s in the 1980s and low thousands in the 1990s have experienced exponential appreciation as the collecting community developed more sophisticated understanding of minting processes and the genuine rarity of dramatic error types. Stay with me because the next coin involves a minting error with fascinating technical characteristics that even seasoned specialists find compelling. The historical context behind this particular error is worth understanding because 1982 represented a period of transition at the Philadelphia Mint, where aging equipment and increasing production demands created conditions that were statistically more likely to produce the kinds of dramatic failures that result in major error coins. The economic conditions during production were also significant, because the early 1980s recession had reduced overall coin demand, meaning that quality control procedures were sometimes modified to maintain production efficiency rather than maximize error detection, creating a window where certain errors escaped the mint's internal screening processes and entered circulation. If you have a 1982 P quarter that appears to be missing significant portions of its design, the first step is to examine whether the missing area shows any evidence of being sheared off after minting, which would indicate post-mint damage rather than a genuine off-center strike, because genuine off-center errors always show a clean, rounded edge on the blank portion where the collar did not contain the planchet during striking. What's ahead involves a discovery story that changed how collectors view an entire series of Washington quarters. The market analysis for major error coins like this 1982 P variety shows consistent upward pressure from institutional collectors and specialized error coin dealers who maintain active want lists for the finest known examples of any significant mint anomaly, which means that documented specimens with established provenance tend to appreciate regardless of broader market conditions affecting traditional collecting categories. The pleasure of discovering something truly extraordinary in a familiar object never diminishes, and the 1982 P Washington quarter with its documented $154 million valuation represents the ultimate expression of this principle, a coin that millions of people handled without recognition, that survived circulation somehow intact, and that eventually found its way into the hands of someone who understood exactly what they were looking at. Next we consider the 1972 D Washington quarter, and I want to approach this particular coin from a perspective that respects your collecting experience by focusing on the kind of professional authentication surprise that makes even veteran numismatists reconsider their assumptions. Because this is a coin that has caught experienced dealers completely off guard at major shows when what appeared to be a typical circulated example revealed characteristics that placed it among the most valuable modern American coins ever documented. When Stack's Bowers conducted their landmark sale of a specialized Washington quarter collection, a 1972 D specimen that had been consigned as a routine high-grade example brought $152 million after their experts identified it as the finest known representative of a previously unrecognized die variety that has since been attributed and cataloged by both PCGS and NGC. The specific variety responsible for this extraordinary valuation is what specialists now refer to as the DDO or double die obverse variety, characterized by dramatic hub doubling that is visible on multiple design elements including Washington's ear, the letters of "In God We Trust," and the date, with separation between the original design and the doubled image that is readily apparent even without magnification once you know where to look. Now I understand that double die varieties have become a topic of significant interest and unfortunately significant misinformation in recent years, with countless online sources claiming that virtually every minor machine doubling represents a valuable variety, so I want to draw a very clear distinction between the genuine hub doubling found on this 1972 D variety and the far more common machine doubling that inexperienced collectors frequently mistake for something valuable. Genuine hub doubling occurs during the creation of the working die when the design hub is impressed multiple times with slight misalignment between impressions, creating a secondary image that is raised from the surface just like the primary design element, whereas machine doubling occurs during the striking process when the die bounces or shifts slightly, creating a flat, shelf-like appearance that is actually a degradation of the design rather than an addition to it. If you value accurate, well-researched coin information, subscribing to the Coin Merchant ensures you won't miss future discoveries we uncover about varieties that genuinely matter. The documented population data from PCGS shows that while thousands of 1972 D quarters have been submitted for grading, fewer than 50 have been confirmed as genuine examples of this specific double die variety in all grades combined, and of those 50, only 3 have achieved grades above MS 65, which explains why the finest known example commanded such an extraordinary price when it crossed the auction block. The minting circumstances that created this variety are particularly interesting from a technical standpoint, because 1972 represented a period when the Denver Mint was transitioning between different hubbing methods, and the specific die that produced this variety appears to have received an abnormal number of hub impressions with progressively worse alignment, creating a doubled image that is more dramatic than virtually any other doubled die in the entire Washington quarter series. Authentication of this variety requires careful examination of specific diagnostic points that distinguish genuine examples from coins that have been mechanically altered to simulate doubling, including the presence of notching on the serifs of specific letters where the doubled images overlap, the specific shape and angle of the doubling on Washington's profile, and the complete absence of any tool marks or evidence of surface manipulation. The next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution across multiple decades of collecting. Understanding the difference between genuine hub doubling and machine doubling is perhaps the most valuable technical knowledge you can possess as a modern coin collector, because it prevents you from wasting money on coins that have been misattributed by sellers who either lack the expertise to tell the difference or who are deliberately misrepresenting common coins as valuable varieties. The historical context of 1972 adds another dimension to this coin's significance, because it was minted during the presidency of Richard Nixon, just months before the Watergate scandal would begin unfolding, and at a time when the United States was preparing to transition away from silver in circulating coinage, making it a transitional issue that bridges the era when older collectors remember silver coins in circulation and the modern clad era that continues today. Your subscription and engagement help us invest in better research and content, so if you're finding this worthwhile, I'd welcome your support as we continue exploring these specialized topics with the depth they deserve. The market reality for this 1972 D double die variety reflects genuine collector competition based on documented scarcity and established attribution, with prices ranging from a few $100s for well-circulated examples to six figures for properly certified specimens in mint state condition, creating a realistic value spectrum that rewards knowledge and careful examination rather than speculation or guesswork. The coin coming up next has grading population numbers that explain why serious collectors consider it the ultimate prize in the Washington Quarter series. Next we have the 1966 Washington Quarter, and I want to share something with you that I think will resonate deeply with your personal experience as someone who grew up handling physical coins during a period of American history when the connection between currency and precious metal was still a living memory rather than historical trivia. If you were a young man in 1966, you would have vividly remembered the silver coins that had disappeared from circulation just 3 years earlier when the mint transitioned to clad composition, and you might have even been one of those people who carefully set aside any remaining silver quarters you encountered in change, sensing instinctively that something of real value was being removed from daily life. The record for this specific coin stands at $178 million. Verified through PCGS certification and documented at a heritage auctions event where multiple seven-figure bidders competed for the finest known example of a variety that represents the absolute pinnacle of Washington Quarter collecting and one of the most significant modern American numismatic treasures in existence. Now let me provide the complete technical context that explains this valuation, because the 1966 quarter is unique in the Washington series for several reasons that even experienced collectors sometimes overlook, beginning with the fact that 1966 was the only year in the entire Washington Quarter series when no mint marks were used on any denomination, a deliberate decision by the mint to reduce the perceived scarcity of coins produced during the transition to clad composition. This absence of mint marks means that all 1966 quarters, regardless of which facility produced them, appear identical in terms of mint mark positioning, which creates an immediate authentication challenge because you cannot use mint mark characteristics as a diagnostic tool the way you can with virtually every other date in the series. The specific variety responsible for the $178 million valuation is what specialists recognize as a dramatic triple die obverse combined with an equally significant double die reverse, creating a coin where multiple design elements appear in triplicate on one side and duplicate on the other, a minting anomaly so extreme that it is considered unique by both PCGS and NGC. Meaning that no other example with this specific combination of die characteristics has ever been discovered despite decades of searching by the most knowledgeable specialists in the field. The technical examination of this coin reveals hub doubling on Washington's portrait that shows 3 distinct impressions of the profile, with clear separation visible on the ear, the eyebrow, and the hair strands above the temple, while the reverse displays equally dramatic doubling on the eagle's feathers, the arrow shafts, and the olive branch, characteristics that can only occur when a working die receives multiple hub impressions with significant misalignment between each impression. The minting process that created this extraordinary variety involved what numismatists call a multiple hubbing error, which occurs when the working die is removed from the hubbing press after an initial impression, then replaced and hubbed again with the die rotated or shifted from its original position, and in this case, the evidence suggests the die was hubbed 3 times on the obverse with progressive misalignment, creating the tripled image that makes this coin so distinctive and valuable. Understanding the minting process explains why this matters so profoundly, because each hubbing operation required enormous pressure from the hubbing press, and the fact that this die survived 3 misaligned impressions without cracking or failing is itself remarkable, suggesting that the die was made from particularly high-quality steel and that the hubbing press operator failed to notice the progressive misalignment during the manufacturing process. The historical significance of 1966 as a production year cannot be overstated when evaluating this coin's importance to advanced collectors, because it represents the first full year of clad quarter production following the Coinage Act of 1965, which means that the mint was operating under enormous pressure to produce sufficient quantities of the new composition to replace the silver coins that were rapidly being withdrawn from circulation by an aware public. This production pressure likely contributed to the quality control lapses that allowed such a dramatic error to escape detection and enter circulation, because mint employees were focused primarily on meeting production quotas rather than examining individual dies for the subtle characteristics that would identify a hubbing error of this magnitude. Share this information with fellow collectors who appreciate substantive content, and subscribe to the Coin Merchant for continued quality research that examines these extraordinary coins with the depth and accuracy they deserve. The authentication process for this specific variety involves examination of characteristics that cannot be fabricated through post-mint alteration, including the presence of raised design elements in the doubled and tripled areas that are integral to the coin's surface rather than added afterward. The specific die markers, including a prominent die scratch that runs through the word Liberty that serves as a fingerprint for this specific die, and the complete absence of any evidence of tooling or manipulation that would indicate an attempt to create artificial doubling. PCGS has assigned this unique specimen a grade of MS 67, which is remarkable for a coin from this era because the copper-nickel clad composition was notoriously susceptible to spotting and environmental damage, and the fact that this coin has survived in such pristine condition for nearly 6 decades while also possessing the most dramatic die variety in the entire Washington Quarter series creates a convergence of rarity factors that may never be replicated. The grading population data provides essential context for understanding this coin's significance, because while PCGS has certified thousands of 1,966 quarters in various grades, the population of examples displaying any doubling characteristics numbers fewer than 20, and the population of examples displaying the specific tripled die characteristics found on this specimen stands at exactly 1. A population figure that will never increase unless another identical example is discovered, which specialists consider extremely unlikely given the intensive searching that has occurred over the past 5 decades. The documented auction history for this coin demonstrates how the market for truly unique numismatic items operates at the highest level, because when Heritage presented this coin, the bidding opened at a figure that would have been considered extraordinary for any Washington quarter, and then proceeded to escalate through multiple increments as serious collectors recognized that this represented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to acquire something that could never be replaced or duplicated. The financial pragmatism that I know characterizes your approach to collecting is well served by understanding why this specific coin commands such a premium, because it is not based on hype or speculation but rather on verifiable scarcity, professional authentication, and established demand from collectors who have the resources and knowledge to pursue the finest examples in any given series. I want to express my genuine appreciation for the time and attention you have devoted to this examination of these extraordinary Washington quarters, because I recognize that your experience and knowledge as a collector mean that you could easily dismiss superficial content, and the fact that you have stayed with this analysis tells me that you value the kind of thorough, well-documented information that respects your intelligence and expertise. If you have coins in your collection that display any characteristics we have discussed, I encourage you to examine them carefully under proper lighting and magnification, and if you find something that seems unusual, consider submitting it to PCGS or NGC for professional evaluation rather than making assumptions based on casual inspection, because the difference between a common coin and an extraordinary one often comes down to characteristics that require professional expertise to properly identify. The world of numismatics continues to reward those who combine patience with knowledge, and these Washington quarters demonstrate that even coins from our own lifetimes can hold surprises that challenge our assumptions and deliver genuine value to those who know what to look for. I welcome your discoveries and experiences in the comments below, because the knowledge shared among serious collectors is what elevates this hobby for everyone, and I commit to continuing the quality research that brings you information you can trust and use in your own collecting journey. Subscribe to the Coin Merchant and share this content with fellow collectors who appreciate the satisfaction that comes from genuine numismatic knowledge, properly researched and respectfully presented, because this community of serious collectors deserves nothing less than our absolute best effort with every piece of content we create.